Welcome to the Real View podcast, where Ohio Realtors connect you to innovators and influencers, keeping you with the real view of real estate. Whether you're a broker, agent, first-time homebuyer, industry leader, or just happen to stumble upon our podcast today, you can expect to hear tips, tools, tricks, interesting information, and so much more from the experts in Ohio's real estate game. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Real View podcast. I am your host, Allison Wiley. Joining me today, I would like to welcome our special guest. His name is Jonathan Pressman. He is a realtor with an MA in writing. He writes about a wide range of financial topics, including real estate, alternate investments, personal finance, and more. Jonathan, I would like to welcome you onto the show today. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Allison. It's great to be here.
And today we are going to talk about building trust with our clients, how to make these relationships strong, what to do, what not to do. Jonathan has some really great tips and advice. And I really think this conversation, is so important right now with everything going on, changes in our industry, making sure that these relationships we have with our clients are strong and that they are feeling valued and that they can trust you, I think is so important to what we have going on right now. So I'm really excited to be hearing from you on that, Jonathan. But before we get started, I would like to hear a little bit more about you. Could you share with us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in real estate and a little bit about what you do now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I knew absolutely nothing about real estate for the better part of my life and into my early career. I started working as a salesperson in the insurance industry, and I learned a little bit about houses because we ask a lot of questions before we agree to insure a home. So I learned a little bit about the architecture, about roofs, about common problems, and some issues that homeowners often face. After that, I went overseas to go work for a venture capital firm as a writer. And a friend of mine from childhood had been bothering me for years. He said, "Come flip houses with me in Florida." I said, you're a crazy man. I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know anything about real estate. How are we going to flip a house? Fast forward a few months, I moved down to Florida. I said, hey, why not? Let's go for it. So I learned quite a bit about real estate there, mostly through trial and error. And we flipped about 30 houses in the first year, a little bit of wholesaling, a little bit of renovating, and really just you learn through trial by fire. So that's how I cut my teeth in the real estate industry. Wanted to move closer to family after a couple of years, so I moved back to Pennsylvania, bought a condo using another agent because I was only licensed in Florida, and realized very quickly that I prefer to be in control of things. So sort of picked up real estate as a side business. I've been involved in writing, sales, and a couple of other businesses. So real estate's been a constant for me, but it's always been on the side, which I actually prefer because I feel it gives me a healthy perspective and I really don't have to rely on the income, which I find very comforting. And it helps me to really do what's best for my clients and to not worry as much about myself and my own motives.
Yeah, well, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit more about you. I always like hearing people's background and how they got started in the industry. So thank you for sharing a little bit more. And that's why one of the reasons why I asked you to come on the show is to talk about working with clients. And it seems like, as you just explained, one of the things that you're really passionate about is just providing that top-notch, high-level, high quality kind of service to your clients. And you mentioned, one of the ways to do that is through building that trust and building that foundation with your client. And we're going to get into some ways that you've had success with doing that, what you would recommend, maybe some other agents doing the same things to build those strong relationships. But we talk about what's ranked highly. What are buyers looking for in their realtor? And, these conversations are happening now. I think buyers are more informed than ever. They are having conversations with their realtors that maybe they haven't before. They are really coming into this relationship very educated and very empowered as to, who they're hoping to work with. We talk about that NAR released a study in what buyers are looking for. And I think the number two things were honesty and trustworthiness. So these are ranked really highly by buyers in choosing a real estate agent. Why do you think that those were ranked so high in the list of everything that the buyers out there could want? that they ranked honesty and trustworthiness so high when choosing an agent?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, trust is one of the most important things in every facet of our lives, whether it's personal, professional relationships. And real estate's no different, especially when you're talking about a purchase that for most people will be the most significant, the most expensive of their lives. So I recently encountered a very disturbing study. It said that real estate agents, I believe it was the second least trusted profession, second only to members of Congress. And I think that really says something. And I know a lot of great ethical agents, and I obviously do my best to always do the right thing for my clients. But at the end of the day, there are some unscrupulous actors in the industry. So I think because people are so skeptical about real estate agents, and we're often likened to used car salespeople, we have to be incredibly diligent and vigilant. We have to be twice as honest, and we have to make sure that we really build that trust because we're representing our clients' financial interests in a lot of cases. So we have that obligation to do what's best for them, and they know that, and they rely on our expertise and on our guidance. And I think that's something that took me a couple of years to recognize. I used to think that it's kind of a guy to open doors, help them through the contract, but I didn't realize how much people rely on you to tell them, yes, this is a good thing. No, this isn't necessarily a good thing. Here are the implications, and to guide them through that whole process, which for most people is really stressful and scary.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. That as you mentioned, this is oftentimes the largest purchase that someone's going to make. And they really rely on this realtor to tell them the truth, to be honest, to tell them if this is something good or not, and to kind of maybe even just be the one to reel them back if they, want to buy a home that maybe is out of their price range. Another thing you talk about is like being honest with them about, their budget and respecting that and saying, hey, yes, this, $1 million house might be great, but that's not going to fit, in your budget. And just being that resource and being that one person to say, like, hey, check this out or notice this, but also to pull them back and make sure that, they are staying with feet on the ground during this process too. And I know that's one thing that you talk about is just respecting the price range, making sure that, you're bringing things to their attention that they wouldn't. Is there anything else that kind of you would offer as a piece of guidance when you work with your clients?
One of the most important things is to essentially get in front of potential problems. So even if you don't necessarily think something is going to be a problem, if you can get out in front of it and then it turns out to be a problem, you'll be so far ahead. And it's also important to recognize that what might not be a big deal for you could be a big deal for your clients. So we sit around and we know that closings are delayed all the time. It's not a big deal. And things come up in the inspection, and most of the time you can come to an agreement either through a price adjustment, a credit, or something to that effect. But for a lot of people, any kind of work in a house that they're not familiar with is incredibly scary. They have no idea what to do. They think there's a little crack, it's the end of the world, you can't possibly fix it. The deal is going to explode, and that's going to be that. I think another really important consideration in today's market, especially, is setting expectations ahead of time. So if you meet somebody and they're looking for a house and they want to move in the next 3 to 6 months, I think it's important to set expectations that they might not find a house in that time frame, especially if they're looking in a competitive market. I have a lot of clients where we looked for a year, 2 years, and initially that was a little bit more difficult because people had the expectation that if they paid this amount, then they would find some comparable that sold and they'd find a house just like that, and that would be the end of it. But that's just not the reality nowadays, especially with inventory shortages, which don't seem to be going anywhere in those hotter markets. So setting those expectations early and often and reminding them of that, I think goes a really long way to a smoother transaction.
Yeah, definitely. And are these conversations, I know you mentioned, having them early, are these conversations that you're having, right at the beginning, or how do you kind of time these conversations? How do you know when is the appropriate time to really bring this stuff up, being clear on the expectations? Is there a sweet spot when it comes to timing that you would recommend having these conversations, or what does that timeline look like?
I don't think there's an exact timeline. It's important not to overwhelm them. I know some agents want to communicate everything up front, but we can't absorb that much information. And again, for a lot of people, this is a stressful experience. So they may not be as attentive as you'd like them to be. And most people aren't taking notes. So I try to ease them into it. And usually I'll mention it either just before the first showing or just after, maybe even during the first showing, just say, this is a really tight market. This is a great area for whatever reason they want to live there. Remind them of that. Say, hey, you wanted to look in this area because it has a really highly rated school and that's important to you, or it's close to your workplace, and reminding them of the comps and showing them the comps. In some cases, even taking them on a tour of a house that's in the area that they may not even want to look at, just so they can understand what houses are going for. And then following up when that house sells to let them know that this is sort of where the market is. And so they don't have sticker shock, or maybe not as severe a case of sticker shock when it comes time to put down that offer.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's kind of on a like client by client basis, I guess. I think when we think about when's the best time to do stuff, you listen to like your gut instinct, and you're the one working with these people. You should know their comfort level. You should know what they're looking for, and kind of timing that based off of every client individually too. I think is a really nice approach, and mention their needs and wants and some of the things that they're hoping to achieve. Regurgitating that information back to them is always helpful too. Another thing that you kind of talk about is the little things, I guess, that are not so little, right? Like showing up on time and being there in person. Talk to us a little bit about, okay, we know that you're the expert in this field and you're giving people, the go-to information, and you're guiding them, you're telling them what's a good investment, what's not, what to look out for in a house, what not to look out for. But talk a little bit about the little things that can really go a long way and why they're so important when you're working with clients.
Yeah. So I can give you a real life example. I went to an open house with a client of mine, and the client went to go look at the house. I like to give people a little bit of space and to be there for them when they need me. But I noticed there was somebody walking around on their own, and I was with my client. So, of course, it's not my business to approach them. But I noticed another agent, not the listing agent, because the listing agent was on their phone the entire time. But this person ended up speaking to the other agent who had lived in the neighborhood and just came by to check it out. And because the listing agent was so absorbed in their cell phone, they actually never said hello to this individual. And the individual ended up signing with the other agent. So I think that sort of speaks volumes to the opportunities that you can miss, not to mention that it's just inconsiderate. These people really want to see their agent putting themselves out there for them and committing to them in more ways than one. So I think it's sort of the least you can do. It's a common courtesy. It's sort of like if you went out on a date with somebody and they were in their phone the whole time, it's a little bit like working with a real estate agent who's on their phone the whole time. It doesn't feel like they value your time or respect you. And you certainly can't convince your clients you're listening when you're texting. So even though I know it's important and sometimes these texts come through, I think we can all wait 30 minutes or an hour until we separate from our clients and show them the respect they deserve.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the little stuff really does go a long way. And like you said, just being on a phone during a showing can have you potentially, lose out. I think, as I mentioned before, consumers are super empowered. They're very smart, and they're going to pick up on stuff like that. And that might be something that turns them away, or makes them want to go in a different direction if they're picking up on that.
This episode of The Real View is brought to you by the Ohio Association of Community Colleges. Ohio's network of community colleges provides accessible training that accommodates the busy lifestyles of aspiring real estate professionals at half the price of a traditional university. With convenient locations in every part of the state, as well as online options, Ohio's community colleges are your smart choice for pre-licensing education. For more details or to start the journey to a real estate career, visit the education page at ohiorealtors.org and then click on the pre-license course locations.
Another thing, when we think about time and presence, and being present and really living in the moments and giving individuals who are in front of us our full attention, another thing is just doing these showings, ourselves. And I think that's something that you talk about too, is just the importance of like, hey, if you have, your clients, they are expecting to work with you. It might be great to be able to toss it to another person, or of course, if you want to bring, someone along with you, but talk to us a little bit about the importance of making sure that you're there for showings and that you're easily and accessible to your clients.
Yeah, this goes back to that same concept of clients needing a little bit of handholding in most cases and feeling like you're committing to them because they're committing to you. So they want your advice, they really want your guidance, they rely on it. And in most cases, sometimes people know their stuff, they don't need you to do much besides open the door. But I think for most buyers, especially first time buyers, they want to see you there. In the case of sellers, it's really difficult for people emotionally to have a bunch of strangers walking around their house. So it gives them some comfort when they know the agent they trust, the actual listing agent, not an assistant or an associate, is in their house posting that open and making sure that people are being respectful of the space and frankly working hard for the money that they're getting paid.
Yeah, definitely. What are the biggest mistakes that you've seen? And I think you just pointed out a great example with your texting and being on the phone during an open house. But what are some other mistakes that you've seen realtors make when it comes to building relationships? Or what are some of your biggest, like, do not do's when it comes to building relationships?
Well, I think for starters, the most important thing you can do is actually just tell people you're an agent constantly. And I'm always amazed, and I've heard from countless other agents that people are surprised to find out they're agents. It doesn't matter that you post about it every day, that you talk about it nonstop. You just have to keep doing that. So I think some agents are a little bit shy, and that's a big mistake because people who know you and trust you and would work with you might just not be aware. Again, despite the fact that you've said it until your face is blue. So I think making sure that everyone's aware, I think sharing your expertise is really important. Some people think that just because somebody knows them, there are no other agents in contention. And I think that's a mistake. You don't want to get complacent. You still want to demonstrate your value. I think agents often get impatient, and I can understand. I've been there too. But again, for a lot of clients, particularly first-time buyers, it's very stressful. It's very scary. They're feeling a lot of different emotions. And we just have to be patient with them and hold their hand through this process and try to understand what they're looking for and recognize they might change their minds. And of course, being attentive, being there, picking up the phone, and making sure that you communicate with them every step of the way because they're sitting there, they're stressed out. If they have a house under contract or if they have an offer out there with a 3-day expiration, they're sitting there for 3 days, biting their nails, waiting to hear back about whether or not their offer was accepted. So giving them some comfort and saying you spoke with the agent, even if you're not really telling them anything of substance, they like to know that you're thinking of them and that you're on top of it.
Yeah, that's really smart and really important, and just making sure, even if you don't have an update, letting them know like, hey, still haven't heard anything, thinking of you guys, hope to hear something soon, even something just like that. Because you're right, when you are in that situation and you're on the end of that and you're waiting and you're like, oh my gosh, is this gonna happen or not? Just being, checked in on and knowing that you're on your realtor's minds, I think really means a lot. And a simple text or check in, even if you don't have an update, is always good. It's always good to hear something, even if it's not, anything of substance, but it's always good to be on the top of the mind with that. So I think that's so true. How do you see any of this changing or not changing? I mean, it sounds like you've been doing this, since you started practicing, building these strong relationships, setting those clear expectations. But now with the NAR settlement and rule changes that just went into effect, this is kind of becoming more of a forefront for agents, and it may have not been in the past. How do you see this kind of changing or not changing, or what are your thoughts on this now? Going to be more of the norm as we move forward with the NAR settlement changes.
So I think one of the challenges of the lawsuit and the settlement, simply that a lot of people don't understand what it means. So from the perspective of the average American, it really just means that the realtors did something they shouldn't do. And I know that there was no admission of guilt, but it doesn't really matter because anytime there's a lawsuit, people associate that with bad or unethical behavior. So I think there is now a new challenge for realtors. We have to work even harder, and we were already working very hard to build that trust. And I think we'll probably have to exercise even more patience because now we're not sure what the commission might be for a particular deal. And we're not sure if somebody might want to negotiate or might be more inclined to negotiate than they were before. And I think we just have to stay the course, continue to act ethically, and do all of these things we were doing before, but be prepared for a little more resistance and to demonstrate our value and our strong ethics to an even greater degree than before.
Yeah, I think so too. And, I said, I think consumers are going to come into this, more aware than maybe they have been before. I do think that they're going to be asking more questions. They're going to want to know clear and upfront why they should choose you over someone else. And I think being prepared for that, maybe more so than what we have in the past, is going to be smart. And I think is going to be something that we should all plan to work on as we head into this new chapter of real estate. Okay, so we've kind of talked about starting that relationship, building that trust, what buyers want, how we can be that guide and that go to person for them. I want to talk a little bit about what happens after closing, right? About that relationship and how to keep that going after the deal has been completed. What are some of your best practices or best advice to handle client relationships after a transaction has been completed?
So I think this is one of the cardinal sins of a lot of agents. And an agent whom I work taught me very early on that you need to follow up after closing, because the reality is, I believe the average American moves every 7 or 8 years. So there's another deal or two right there when they sell and go to buy something else. Maybe it's not in your state, but you can still get that referral commission if you work with agents in other states. And a lot of people will buy investment properties. They'll have friends and family want to buy. So don't think of it as that singular transaction. You got the commission, that's great. Now follow up. So what I like to do is follow up immediately, obviously to make sure everything's okay. Make sure they've moved in, they're feeling good. I'll follow up maybe a week or two later. Same thing, check in on them. A couple of months later, same thing, check in on them. And it might seem annoying, but I'm on their minds. And I know when they have a friend or family member, and this has worked many times, that they're going to think of me. So whether or not they actually do work with you again, it's just a best practice to follow up with them and to care about them on a human level. You want to make sure they're moving somewhere else. Are they okay? Do they need recommendations for contractors? That's another big one, because a lot of people don't necessarily have those connections, and we as agents often do. So if you can give them a couple of recommendations of plumbers, electricians, roofers, whatever it is, that will really go a long way. They'll appreciate that. And it's also beneficial for you when you work with these contractors for when it comes time to do work in your own home. So I think it's a win-win situation there.
Yeah, no, that's really smart too. And even, hey, here's a great restaurant that just opened, or hey, I know this is right around the corner from your house. Check this out, or here's this, happening in your neighborhood. I always think that, especially when you think about people moving into new areas that they may have not been in before, being able to connect them, yes, with individuals and professionals that can help them, in their homes, but like with stuff going on in the neighborhood, I think that's a great resource that you could provide to your clients as to help them get more involved and feel more comfortable in their new environment. So that's a really great bit of advice. And you mentioned too about building that personal relationship with them too. Talk to us a little bit about how agents can kind of find that perfect balance between discussing real estate and connecting on a more personal level with clients.
Yeah. So obviously, the reason you're meeting is probably because you're talking about real estate. If you're friends with the person, or if it's a family member, you have that connection. So I don't need to tell you how to be friends with somebody you're already friends with, or how to treat your family members. But if it's somebody else, I just try to find common ground. Now, this is a human being, and obviously real estate is our focus, but that doesn't mean there's no room for a little conversation about their dog, if they have a dog, for instance, or a cat. I talk to them about the type of dog or cat they have, what they're like. And then if I know about a dog park down the street, I'll say, hey, there's a great dog park over there, or a pet shop that loves to give out treats. So I think that's a great way to connect the neighborhood to their personal lives. You can talk about work, you can talk about hobbies or sports. All of these are great ways to build more trust and to strengthen that relationship with your clients or customers. And it's really easy to do. There's no guidebook on that. But if we can just treat them like humans and friends, then I think we'll have a better business relationship. So if they're not interested, you'll know, but most people are happy to have a conversation about themselves. And in many cases, it can also lead to some important findings, like maybe something that could change the neighborhood they want to live in, or help you gather more information that could lead you to sending them homes that are more relevant. So I always pay attention to their answers because it can help me be a better agent, in addition to just being a friendly individual.
Yeah, so true. I think, like you said, you can get to know a little bit more about them, about what they're looking for, some of their stuff that's important to them in their lives, the favorite things that they love to do. That can really help you become a better agent, then in return. And I think that that's really great. Any last bits of advice, words of wisdom? Number one, you have to do this when working with your clients. Anything to that you want to mention, maybe that we haven't covered here so far today?
Yeah, I think just staying in it for the long haul. Don't write a client off because they haven't purchased anything. I've seen people search for years and then buy something out of the blue one day. Give people time, go along with them for the journey, and exercise the patience that you need to exercise in order to get the deal done. Just hang with them, because I know it's really hard, especially when you need that commission, when they've seen 50 places and they can't seem to make up their minds. But you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. But if you give up, then you definitely won't get to the finish line. So, yep, just hang tight and stay in it for the long haul.
Yeah, be patient. I think that is so key, when we think about working with clients. It's just, yes, like you mentioned, of course, we all know why we're in this. We want to make money on this. Of course, this is our job. But also just to know that, it's a big deal, as you mentioned before. It's a big purchase. It's a big dollar sign on the price of a home. But working with them, being patient, exercising empathy, and putting yourself in their shoes, I think really can go a long way. So, Jonathan, this was fantastic. I want to thank you again so much for coming on, for sharing your expertise and your years of knowledge and everything that you've learned while practicing real estate. It sounds like, you've really got a great perspective on this, and you make our realtor family proud. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing a little bit more about you and your expertise.
Thank you, Allison.
And to all of our listeners, I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll be back with you next week. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to The Real View. That wraps up today's episode. You can keep up with the latest on the podcast at ohiorealtors.org/therealview and on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Have questions, comments, or suggestions? We want to hear from you. Email us at podcast@ohiorealtors.org. We'll see you next time.